Maria Johnson moved through the gleaming halls of Iron Forge Academy like a ghost, her worn sneakers silent against the polished floors of the upscale Phoenix gym. At 42, her dark eyes carried the weight of a life no one here suspected a past as a Golden Gloves boxing champion and a martial arts instructor who'd trained fighters across the country. Now, she pushed a janitor's cart through the 8,000-square-foot facility, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the glittering Scottsdale skyline. Chrome and black dominated the gym's aesthetic, from the professional-grade octagon ring to the rows of punching bags hanging like silent sentinels. Everything screamed money, exclusivity, and ambition, an empire built for Phoenix's elite, where tech executives, athletes, and influencers came to sculpt their bodies and egos. Maria, in her faded blue uniform, was invisible to them, just another piece of the gym's machinery, as unremarkable as the motivational posters plastered on the walls. Her cart rattled softly as she emptied trash bins, wiped down equipment, and scrubbed sweat from the mats, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. She worked the night shift, slipping through the back entrance at 600 p.m. sharp, blending into the background while the gym buzzed with the clatter of weights and the shouts of trainers. Her daughter Maya waited at home in their cramped apartment, 15 minutes away, her homework spread across a wobbly kitchen table, her 16-year-old eyes no longer asking why her mother cleaned floors for $12 an hour. The medical bills from Maria's late husband's illness had answered that question years ago, leaving them with debts that clung like damp rot. Survival demanded silence, and Maria had learned to swallow her pride as easily as she breathed. But silence didn't mean surrender. Every night, as Maria cleaned her eyes, absorbed the gym's rhythm, the sloppy jabs of overconfident students, the flawed footwork of instructors, the arrogance that permeated every corner of Iron Forge. At the heart of it all was Derek Stone, the 35-year-old head trainer who owned 30% of the gym and ruled it like a king. Derek was a man who'd never quite made it as a professional fighter, but had carved out a kingdom training Phoenix's wealthy. His Instagram feed, with its 500,000 followers, was a shrine to his brand highlight reels of knockouts, shirtless, flexing in front of mirrors, and captions preaching alpha mentality. His students worshipped him, hanging on his every word, oblivious to the technical errors Maria spotted in his instruction combinations that left fighters open defenses that invited disaster. Derek's empire was built on charisma, not competence, and he guarded it fiercely. To him, Maria was less than nothing, a black woman in a janitor's uniform who existed to clean up his messes. He made that clear every chance he got, his voice dripping with condescension as he barked orders or accidentally kicked over her mop bucket, sending dirty water across her freshly cleaned floors. "Maybe if you moved faster, we wouldn't have to look at this mess." He'd sneer, stepping over the spill, as if Maria herself were debris. The other trainers, mostly younger, white and male, chuckled nervously or looked away, unwilling to challenge the man who signed their paychecks. The students, wealthy and entitled, followed his lead, treating Maria with the same casual disregard. Maria endured it all with a stillness that masked the fire inside her. Her hands, weathered from years of throwing punches and gripping mops, trembled not from fear, but from restraint. 20 years of boxing, martial arts, and combatives training lived in her muscles, in the way her shoulders squared instinctively when she watched sparring sessions from the shadows. She'd boxed competitively in her 20s, her name etched on trophies now gathering dust in a storage unit across town. She'd trained soldiers and civilians alike, her classes packed with students who respected her precision and power. But life had a way of grinding down even the strongest, and after her husband's death, Maria had traded her gloves for a mop, her pride for a paycheck. Maya needed school clothes, Textbooks, a future. So Maria cleaned night after night, absorbing Derek's insults like body shots, staying on her feet, through sheer will. She noticed the gym's flaws, the cracked mirrors Derek blamed on her, the equipment he'd forget to secure, so it fell into her path the way he'd schedule emergency cleaning during peak hours to maximize her humiliation. "Careful, Maria," he'd say, loudly smirking as students watched. "Don't want to break anything expensive." The word girl slipped into his taunts, sometimes laced with just enough venom to sting without crossing into overt complaints. Maria kept her eyes down, her responses short, her dignity intact. But Derek's cruelty was relentless, a campaign designed to remind her of her place. Coach Rivera, the gym's older Hispanic trainer, saw more than most. At 60, he'd been coaching fighters for 3 decades, his sharp eyes catching what others missed. He noticed how Maria's posture shifted when she watched grappling demonstrations, her hands unconsciously forming a perfect guard as she wiped down mirrors. He saw the muscle memory in her movements, the way she carried herself like someone who'd spent years in the ring. Rivera had trained champions, sparred with legends, and he knew a fighter when he saw one. He tried talking to Maria once late at night, when the gym was empty, asking about her past. "You ever fight?" he'd asked, leaning against a heavy bag. Maria had smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Just cleaning here, coach." But Rivera wasn't fooled. He saw the way her eyes tracked Derek's sloppy technique, the way her jaw tightened when he taught students dangerous habits, chins up, arms too wide, defenses that would get them hurt in a real fight. Rivera kept his thoughts to himself, but he watched, waiting for the moment Maria's silence would break. Sarah Martinez, the gym's manager, was caught in a different kind of trap. A 32-year-old single mother, she ran the front desk with quiet efficiency, keeping Derek's harassment complaints locked in a filing cabinet. 3 other minority staff members had quit in the past 2 years, citing a hostile work environment, but Sarah stayed. She needed the job as much as Maria did, and she knew Derek's power extended beyond the gym's walls. He was connected, charismatic, a local celebrity who could ruin careers with a single post. Sarah documented everything, every insult, every spilled bucket, every time Derek made Maria's life harder than it needed to be, but she hesitated to act. The gym's owners, wealthy investors who rarely visited, had made it clear Derek was the face of Iron Forge, and protecting him protected their profits. Sarah's notes were her insurance policy, a quiet rebellion she hoped she'd never need to use. But every time she saw Maria cleaning up another of Derek's deliberate messes, guilt gnawed at her. She'd catch Maria's eye, sometimes offering a small nod of apology, but Maria never responded. She just kept working her silence louder than any complaint. Derek's favorite target was Maria's invisibility. He'd walk past her barking orders for no reason or accidentally bump her cart, scattering her supplies. "Oops," he'd say, his grin sharp as a blade. "Better clean that up quick, Maria. We've got real athletes here." The students laughed, some uncomfortably, others eager to curry favor with their trainer. Derek's prize student, Tyler Harrison, a 21-year-old college wrestler with a trust fund and a black belt in arrogance, was the worst. He'd mimic Derek's taunts, tossing protein bar wrappers on the floor Maria had just cleaned, smirking as she bent to pick them up. Tyler had talent, but no discipline, his technique riddled with flaws Derek never corrected. Maria saw it all, the overextended punches, the exposed neck, the lazy footwork that would get him submitted in seconds against a skilled opponent. She wanted to speak up, to warn Tyler that Derek's instruction was setting him up for failure, but she knew better. Crossing Derek meant losing her job, and losing her job meant failing Maya. So she stayed silent, her knowledge a secret she carried like a weapon she couldn't use. The gym's lobby monitors, played security footage from the day's training sessions, looping Derek's highlight reels for the world to see. Maria watched them as she cleaned her eyes, catching every mistake, every moment of poor instruction that Derek's paying customers accepted as gospel. She saw the way he taught Tyler a rear naked choke defense that left his neck wide open, a mistake so basic it would have gotten laughs in her old boxing gym. She saw the way Derek's combinations ignored defensive fundamentals, leaving his students vulnerable. It was maddening watching a man who knew so little teach so much, but Maria kept her thoughts locked away. Her job was to clean, not to coach. Her life was about survival, not pride. But sometimes in the quiet hours after midnight, when the gym was hers alone, Maria let herself remember. She'd pause by the heavy bags, her reflection in the mirrors, showing glimpses of the fighter she used to be. Her hands would twitch, itching to throw a jab, a cross, a hook combinations that had once won her titles. Those were the moments when Maria Johnson felt dangerous, when the weight of 20 years of suppressed skill pressed against the walls of her silence. Derek's campaign against Maria grew bolder with time. He'd schedule her cleaning during peak training hours, forcing her to mop around sparring sessions, dodging sweaty bodies and flying equipment. He'd critique her work loudly, pointing out imaginary streaks on mirrors she'd polished to perfection. "Do it again," he'd say, arms crossed, watching as she scrubbed the same spot 3 times. The other trainers avoided her during these moments, their eyes fixed on the floor, unwilling to witness the humiliation. But Maria noticed their discomfort just as she noticed the students' phones always ready to capture a moment for Derek's social media. He'd started posting about her subtle at first, a photo of a mop bucket with a caption about knowing your place, a video of her cleaning in the background while he flexed for the camera. The comments were ugly, filled with laughter and cruelty, and Maria saw them all. She didn't have an Instagram account, but Maya did, and her daughter's tears over the posts were harder to bear than any of Derek's insults. Still, Maria cleaned. She endured. She survived. One night, as Maria wiped down the heavy bags, Derek pushed too far. He'd been sparring with Tyler, showing off for a group of new students, when he accidentally kicked a water bottle across the floor, soaking Maria's freshly mopped mats. "Clean it up, Maria," he called, his voice carrying over the gym's hum. "Maybe if you spent less time daydreaming and more time working, this place would actually look decent." The students laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that cut through the air. Maria's hands tightened on the mop handle, her knuckles whitening, but she kept her eyes down. She knelt to clean the spill, her uniform soaking through her body, trembling with something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not anger, but something deeper, something Derek Stone had no idea he was awakening. Rivera, watching from the corner, caught her eye for a moment, his expression unreadable. Sarah, behind the front desk, looked away, her hands clenched into fists. The gym was a pressure cooker, and Maria was the one person everyone underestimated. Derek, oblivious to the storm he was stirring, smirked, and turned back to his students, confident in his control. But Maria's silence wasn't weakness. It was a choice, a shield, a strategy. And in the quiet of that moment, as she cleaned up his mess, Maria Johnson knew one thing for certain. Derek Stone had no idea what he was up against. Maria Johnson stood in the dim glow of Iron Forge Academy's fluorescent lights, her mop resting against the wall as the memory of Derek Stone's latest humiliation burned in her chest. The gym, with its sleek chrome equipment and towering windows overlooking Scottsdale's glittering streets, felt like a cage tonight. For 3 years, she'd been invisible, a 42-year-old black woman in a janitor's uniform, her past as a Golden Gloves boxing champion and martial arts instructor buried beneath the weight of survival. Her daughter Maya needed her to keep this job to pay off the lingering medical bills from her late husband's illness, to keep food on their table. But Derek, the 35-year-old head trainer who ruled the gym like a petty tyrant, had pushed too far. His taunts, his spilled water bottles, his mocking social media posts, they were no longer just insults. They were declarations of war. Tonight, as Maria wiped down the heavy bags, her hands moved with a rhythm that betrayed her training, her fingers curling as if itching to form a fist. She caught her reflection in the mirror, a flicker of the fighter she used to be, and for the first time in years, she let herself feel the spark of something dangerous. Derek Stone, oblivious to the storm he was stoking, strutted across the gym, his voice booming over the clatter of weights and the grunts of his students. His Instagram feed was his gospel, a curated shrine of knockouts and motivational quotes about alpha mentality that his 500,000 followers devoured. At 30% ownership of Iron Forge, he was the gym's face, its brand, its king. But his kingdom was built on shaky ground charisma, not skill. Maria saw it every night in his flawed techniques, the way he taught students to keep their chins up during a choke defense, the sloppy combinations that left them open to counters, the overconfident swagger that masked his lack of depth. His prize student, Tyler Harrison, a 21-year-old college wrestler with a trust fund and a chip on his shoulder, was the perfect example. Tyler had raw talent, but terrible habits. His defense so porous, Maria could have slipped a jab through it blindfolded. Derek never corrected him, either too ignorant or too arrogant to notice. Maria watched it all, her silence a shield, her knowledge a weapon she couldn't afford to use. But Derek's latest stunt was about to change that. It started with a sparring session, one of Derek's showy demonstrations, for a group of new students, tech bros, and influencers paying $500 a month for his elite training. He was in the octagon, barking instructions at Tyler, his voice carrying that mix of bravado and cruelty that made Maria's jaw clench. Hit harder. "Tyler, don't fight like a janitor," he shouted, glancing at Maria with a smirk. The students laughed, their phones already out, ready to capture Derek's next viral moment. Maria kept mopping her movements steady, but her eyes caught every mistake in Tyler's form, the way his feet crossed, the way his guard dropped. Derek noticed her watching and saw an opportunity. "Hey, Maria," he called, stepping out of the ring, his voice dripping with mockery. "You think you can do better? Why don't you show us how it's done?" The gym went quiet, the hum of the air conditioning suddenly deafening. Maria froze, her hands tightening on the mop handle. She knew this was a trap, a chance for Derek to humiliate her in front of his paying customers. Refuse, and she'd look weak. Comply, and she'd risk revealing the truth about who she was. "Come on, don't be shy," Derek pressed, striding toward her, his students trailing like a pack of eager wolves. "You're always watching us train. Got some secret moves you want to share?" His tone was light, but his eyes were cold, calculating. Maria met his gaze, her expression calm but unyielding. "I just clean here, sir," she said, her voice low, steady. Derek's grin widened, sensing victory. "Oh, come on now. You've been eyeballing my technique for months. Let's see what you've got." He pointed at the heavy bag, its chain glinting under the lights. "Show the class how it's done, or are you just all talk?" The students murmured, some chuckling, others shifting uncomfortably. Sarah Martinez, the gym's manager, looked up from the front desk, her fingers tightening around her pen. Coach Rivera, leaning against a wall, watched with narrowed eyes, his decades of experience telling him this was no game. Maria set the mop down, her movements deliberate, and walked to the heavy bag. The gym held its breath. What happened next was like watching a dormant volcano erupt. Maria's first combination was a thing of beauty, a jab-cross-hook sequence that snapped the 100-pound bag back 3 feet, the chain groaning under the impact. Her footwork was textbook, her hips rotating with surgical precision, her fists landing with a force that echoed through the room. The second combination was even sharper, a flurry of punches that nearly tore the bag from its mounting. She stepped back, her breathing steady, her eyes locked on the bag, as if it were an opponent she'd just dismantled. The gym was silent, the students' phones still raised, capturing every second. Derek's smirk vanished, his face paling, as he realized he'd miscalculated. Tyler's jaw dropped, recognition dawning in his eyes. This was how real fighters moved. Sarah's pen froze midair, her expression a mix of awe and fear. Rivera's lips twitched into a faint smile, as if he'd known this was coming all along. Maria picked up her mop, her face impassive, but the damage was done. She'd shown them a glimpse of who she was, and there was no going back. Derek's ego couldn't handle it. For the rest of the night, he was quieter than usual, his usual bravado replaced by a simmering anger. He barked at his students, his corrections harsher, his demonstrations sloppier. Maria felt his eyes on her as she cleaned a predator sizing up prey. He'd underestimated. By the next evening, he'd devised a plan to reclaim his dominance. He announced it during a packed training session, his voice loud enough to carry to every corner of the gym. "Since our janitor thinks she's a fighter, let's give her a real chance to prove it," he said, his grin forced but menacing. "Maria, you and me in the ring. A friendly spar. Let's see if you can back up that little show." The students cheered, caught up in the drama, their phones already recording. Maria's heart sank, but her face remained a mask. She knew refusing wasn't an option. Derek would spin it as cowardice, and she'd lose what little respect she'd earned. Agreeing meant risking everything: her job, her anonymity, her carefully constructed life. But as she looked at Derek's smug face, something shifted inside her. 3 years of swallowed insults, of cleaning his messes, of enduring his cruelty, it was enough. "I'll do it," Maria said, her voice cutting through the noise. The gym erupted in murmurs, students exchanging glances, some excited, others uneasy. Derek's grin faltered for a split second, but he recovered quickly. "Good. Friday night after hours. We'll make it a show." He turned to his students, raising his fists like a prize fighter. "Who's ready to see me teach our janitor a lesson?" The cheers were deafening, but Maria caught Rivera's eye across the room. He gave her a small nod, a silent promise of support. Sarah, behind the desk, looked like she wanted to say something but didn't, her hands trembling as she typed up the event announcement. Maya at home would find out soon enough, and Maria dreaded the conversation they'd have. But for now, she had a fight to prepare for, a fight she hadn't asked for but couldn't avoid. Maria trained in secret, slipping into the gym before dawn with Rivera's help. The 60-year-old coach opened the facility early, his keys jangling as he let her in through the back door. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. Maria nodded, wrapping her hands with old leather strips she'd kept hidden in her locker. "He's not giving me a choice." Rivera watched as she moved through her warm-up, her jabs slicing the air with precision, her footwork fluid and controlled. "You're better than him," he said after a few minutes, his tone matter-of-fact. "He's got power, but his technique's garbage. You know that." Maria didn't respond, her focus on the heavy bag, as she threw combinations that would have made her old coaches proud. Rivera guided her through drills, refining her timing, her angles, her defensive patterns. He'd seen Derek fight sloppy, overconfident, reliant on intimidation rather than skill. Maria, on the other hand, was a technician, her movements honed by years of discipline. "He's going to come out swinging," Rivera warned. "Let him tire himself out. Then you end it." Maria nodded, her mind already in the ring, visualizing every move. Derek, meanwhile, was in full performance mode. He spent the week hyping the fight on social media, posting videos of his workouts with captions like, "Getting ready to school the help and time for a reality check." His followers ate it up, flooding the comments with laughing emojis and predictions of a quick knockout. He trained harder than usual, his sessions filled with wild haymakers and showy kicks, his students cheering him on like he was a gladiator. He didn't take Maria seriously, not really. To him, she was a janitor who'd gotten lucky with a heavy bag, a woman who'd overstepped her place and needed to be put back in it. He didn't know about her championships, her years of training, her ability to read opponents like open books. He didn't know he was walking into a fight he couldn't win. Friday night transformed Iron Forge Academy into a coliseum. The gym was packed, over 200 people crowding the main floor, phones raised to capture the spectacle. Local MMA enthusiasts had caught wind of the event, and betting pools were already forming. Sarah had set up a makeshift ring, taped boundaries on the training mats, and was reluctantly acting as referee. Rivera stood in Maria's corner, his presence a quiet reassurance. Derek bounced on his toes, his muscles gleaming under the lights, his voice loud as he trash-talked for the cameras. "Hope you're ready, Maria," he called, flexing for his Instagram Live. "Time to learn your place." Maria entered quietly, wearing simple black shorts and hand wraps, her face calm, her eyes focused. She didn't respond to his taunts, didn't play to the crowd. She was here to fight, not perform. Sarah's voice cut through the noise. 3 3-minute rounds, or until someone can't continue. Touch gloves and keep it clean. Derek extended his gloves, his grin predatory. Maria met them with a steady tap, her expression unreadable. The bell wasn't a bell, just Sarah shouting, "Fight!" and Derek charged like a bull, throwing wild haymakers meant to end it fast. He wanted a knockout, something brutal and viral to cement his dominance. But Maria wasn't there. She slipped his first punch with a subtle lean, ducked the second with a smooth bob, and stepped inside the arc of his third, a looping overhand right that missed by inches. The crowd, expecting a quick slaughter, grew quiet, confused. Maria didn't throw a single punch in the first minute, her movements economical, her defense a masterclass in evasion. Derek's face reddened, his breaths coming harder as he swung and missed, his energy draining with every failed attack. Maria's eyes tracked his every move, her body relaxed but ready, waiting for the moment she knew would come. With 30 seconds left in the round, Derek overcommitted, throwing a right cross with all his weight behind it. Maria saw it coming a mile away. She stepped inside, her left hand snapping up in a perfect hook that caught Derek on the point of his jaw. The sound was like a gunshot, sharp and final. Derek's knees buckled his body, crumpling to the mats out cold before he hit the ground. The gym fell silent, phones still recording, capturing the moment that would change everything. Maria dropped to one knee beside him, checking his pulse with the calm professionalism of someone who'd been in real fights. Derek's eyes fluttered open after 20 seconds, dazed and disoriented. "You okay?" Maria asked, her voice soft but steady. He nodded weakly. His pride shattered more than his jaw. The crowd erupted cheers, mixing with gasps, as the realization hit the janitor had just knocked out the king. Within minutes, the video was everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. Justice for Maria began trending, the clip racking up thousands of views as local MMA forums buzzed with analysis of Maria's perfect technique. Derek stumbled to his corner, his face a mask of shock and humiliation, while Maria returned to hers, her expression unchanged. Rivera clapped her shoulder, his voice low. "You did what you had to." But Maria knew this wasn't the end. Derek's ego wouldn't let this go, and the fallout was coming. As she unwrapped her hands, the weight of what she'd done settled in. She'd exposed herself, her skills, her past. And in doing so, she'd made an enemy who'd stop at nothing to destroy her. The video of Maria Johnson's knockout punch spread like wildfire across Phoenix's digital landscape, its flames licking at Derek Stone's carefully crafted empire. By morning, the clip had racked up over 1 million views, shared by MMA enthusiasts, local bloggers, and even a few professional fighters who praised Maria's surgical precision. Justice for Maria trended on every platform, the hashtag a rallying cry for those who saw in her a symbol of quiet strength, triumphing over arrogance. But in the sleek, chrome-plated halls of Iron Forge Academy, the mood was anything but celebratory. Derek Stone, the 35-year-old head trainer whose jaw still ached from Maria's perfectly placed hook, sat in his office, his face a storm cloud of rage and humiliation. The gym, with its 8,000 square feet of polished floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Scottsdale's glittering skyline, felt like a kingdom under siege. Derek's Instagram, once a shrine to his alpha mentality, was now a battleground flooded with comments calling him out for underestimating the 42-year-old black female janitor who'd knocked him out cold in front of his own students. Maria, meanwhile, returned to her night shift, her worn sneakers silent against the mats, her hands steady as she mopped up the gym's messes. She'd exposed her past as a Golden Gloves champion and martial arts instructor, but the victory came with a cost. She knew Derek wouldn't let this go, not his pride, not his power, not his need for control. Maria's daughter, Maya, a 16-year-old with a sharp mind and a fiercer heart, saw the video before her mother did. Sitting in their cramped Phoenix apartment, her homework forgotten on the kitchen table, Maya watched the clip on TikTok, her eyes wide with pride and fear. "Mom, you're a hero," she said when Maria got home, her voice trembling with emotion. But Maria's face was grim as she unwrapped her hands, the old leather strips stained with years of sweat and resolve. "Heroes don't keep jobs, Maya," she said quietly. "And we need this one." Maya's fingers hovered over her phone, itching to respond to the thousands of comments praising her mother, but Maria shook her head. "Let it be. It's done." But it wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Derek Stone was already plotting his revenge, and he wasn't going to fight it out in the ring this time. He'd learned his lesson about underestimating Maria in a physical contest. Instead, he turned to a battlefield where his wealth and connections gave him the upper hand, the law. By Monday, Derek had hired Richard Kellerman, a high-priced attorney known for turning losses into lawsuits. Kellerman's office in downtown Phoenix was as polished as Iron Forge itself, all glass and steel, a perfect backdrop for Derek's new persona, the victim. "I feared for my life," Derek told Kellerman, his jaw still wrapped in a subtle brace for dramatic effect. "She's a trained fighter who ambushed me in what was supposed to be a friendly spar. I could have died." Kellerman nodded his pen, moving swiftly across a legal pad. The narrative was simple but effective. Maria Johnson, a janitor with a hidden history of combat training, had used excessive force against an unsuspecting employer, exploiting a workplace event to settle a personal grudge. It was a story designed to resonate with juries, to paint Maria as a dangerous outlier who'd deceived everyone around her. Kellerman filed felony assault charges with enhanced penalties for workplace violence, citing Derek's ongoing medical issues and emotional distress. The claim sought $250,000 in damages, a sum that would crush Maria's fragile financial stability. When the police arrived at her apartment at 6:00 a.m. the next morning, Maya watched through the kitchen window, her heart breaking as her mother was led away in handcuffs, her face calm, but her eyes burning with something unspoken. The news hit Phoenix like a shockwave. Local stations ran Derek's story first, his polished interviews painting a picture of a benevolent trainer attacked by an unstable employee. "I gave Maria a job when no one else would," he told a sympathetic anchor on Channel 12, his voice soft, his jaw brace prominently displayed. "I thought I was helping her, giving her structure. This is how she repaid me with violence that could have killed me." The footage was selectively edited, showing only Maria's knockout punch, stripped of context, devoid of the 3 years of harassment that had led to that moment. Social media algorithms amplified Derek's narrative, pushing our justice for Derek posts to audiences already primed to see him as a victim of an ungrateful subordinate. Comments on his Instagram turned vicious, filled with racist and sexist vitriol. "Stick to cleaning one" raid with hundreds of likes. "She thinks she's a fighter." "Go back to the mop," said another. Maya, scrolling through the hate, felt her stomach churn, but she refused to stay silent. She created a TikTok account under the handle @MayaFightsBack and posted her first video, a shaky, tearful plea to the world. "My mom's not a criminal," she said, holding up a photo of Maria in her boxing days, her gloves raised in victory. "She's a champion who's been bullied for years. This is the truth." The video got a few hundred views at first, but it was a spark in a dry forest ready to ignite. At Iron Forge, the atmosphere was tense. Sarah Martinez, the gym's manager, sat behind the front desk, her hands trembling as she fielded calls from reporters and angry students. She'd documented Derek's harassment of Maria for years, every spilled bucket, every racial slur, every deliberate humiliation, her notes locked in a filing cabinet she hadn't dared open until now. But the gym's owners, wealthy investors who saw Derek as their golden goose, leaned on her hard. "Stay out of it," Sarah James Morrison, the primary investor, warned over the phone. "We can't afford a scandal. Derek's the brand." Sarah's silence was her job security, but her conscience gnawed at her. She'd seen Maria endure Derek's cruelty with a dignity she couldn't fathom, and now Maria was facing prison for defending herself. Sarah glanced at the security monitors, the looping footage of Derek's knockout, a constant reminder of the truth. She pulled out her phone and texted Coach Rivera. "We need to talk." Rivera, the 60-year-old trainer who'd spotted Maria's talent from the start, was already moving. He'd been at the gym the night of the fight, watching from Maria's corner, his heart swelling with pride as she dismantled Derek with a single punch. But now, as Maria sat in a holding cell, Rivera knew pride wasn't enough. He'd recorded Derek's harassment on his phone for months, not just the overt insults, but the subtle cruelties, the way Derek timed his taunts to hit when Maria was most vulnerable. One clip from a month ago captured Derek laughing with another trainer. "I'm going to break her down until she quits or snaps. Either way, she's gone." Rivera hadn't shared the recordings, fearing retaliation from the gym's owners, but the sight of Maria in handcuffs changed everything. He met Sarah in the gym's parking lot after hours, the Scottsdale skyline glowing in the distance. "I've got audio," he said, his voice low. "Enough to bury him." Sarah nodded, her jaw tight. "I've got complaints. 7 of them, all filed, all ignored." They looked at each other, two people caught in a system that rewarded silence, knowing the cost of speaking up could be their livelihoods. But Maria's dignity, her quiet strength, demanded more. Maria's court-appointed attorney, Jennifer Walsh, was a harried public defender juggling dozens of cases, her desk buried under files. During their 15-minute consultation in a cramped courthouse room, she laid out the stakes with brutal clarity. "They're pushing for felony assault, Maria," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Stone's lawyer claims you used lethal force against an amateur, exploiting your training to cause harm. They've got medical records, concussion symptoms, therapy bills, the works. It's a strong case." Maria sat across from her, her hands folded, her face unreadable. "He pushed me into that fight," she said quietly. 3 years of pushing." Walsh sighed, her expression softening. "I believe you, but we need evidence. Witnesses, documentation, anything." Maria thought of Sarah of Rivera, of the security cameras that had captured every moment of Derek's campaign against her. But she also thought of Maya waiting at home, her future hanging on her mother's freedom. "Do what you can." Maria said, her voice steady but heavy, with the weight of everything she stood to lose. The preliminary hearing was a circus. Derek's supporters packed half the courtroom, many wearing #Justice. For Derek t-shirts, their signs about workplace safety, a stark contrast to the #Justice for Maria crowd fueled by Maya's viral TikTok campaign. Derek took the stand first, his performance Oscar-worthy. He spoke softly, his jaw brace a prop, his eyes glistening as he described the unprovoked attack that had left him unconscious. "I thought it was a friendly spar," he said, his voice breaking. "I was trying to help her, give her a chance to shine. Then she hit me with a punch that could have killed me." Kellerman guided him through a carefully crafted story, emphasizing Maria's hidden combat training, her deceptive silence about her skills. She misled everyone, Kellerman argued, his voice smooth as silk. She's a trained fighter who used her expertise to harm an unsuspecting employer. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, listened impassively, her pen scratching notes. Maria sat at the defense table, her heart pounding but her face calm, her years of discipline keeping her steady under the weight of the lies. Jennifer Walsh's cross-examination was a slow burn. Armed with Maya's videos, which had now reached over 1 million views, and a growing file of evidence from Sarah and Rivera, she began to chip away at Derek's facade. "Mr. Stone," she said, her voice sharp, on February 10th, "you were recorded saying, and I quote, 'I'm gonna break her down until she quits or snaps.'" Do you recall that Derek shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening? "I don't remember saying that." Walsh held up her phone, playing the audio for the courtroom. Derek's voice, clear and cruel, filled the silence. "She thinks she's tough watching us train. I'll make her life hell until she's gone." The courtroom murmured, the #Justice for Derek crowd shifting uncomfortably. "You called Ms. Johnson girl repeatedly, didn't you?" Walsh pressed. Derek's face flushed. It was just casual talk. Walsh's eyes narrowed. Casual talk. "We have 12 recordings of you using degrading language toward Ms. Johnson, including racial and sexist slurs. Is that casual?" Derek stammered, his victim persona cracking under the pressure. "I didn't mean anything by it." Sarah Martinez's testimony was the turning point. Despite threats from the gym's owners, she took the stand, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "I filed 7 complaints about Mr. Stone's behavior toward Maria," she said, holding up a stack of documents. Each one detailed harassment, spilled buckets, public insults, deliberate scheduling to humiliate her. Every time I was told to handle it internally. Mr. Stone wanted Maria gone, and he made sure she knew it. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Sarah's decision to testify had cost her. Whispers of termination were already circulating, but she looked at Maria as she stepped down, a silent apology in her eyes. Maria nodded, a small gesture of gratitude, knowing what Sarah had risked. Rivera's testimony sealed Derek's fate. The veteran trainer walked to the stand with the confidence of a man who'd seen it all. "I've trained fighters for 30 years, he said, his voice steady. "Maria Johnson is one of the best I've ever seen. But Derek Stone, he's a fraud. His techniques are dangerous, his ego's bigger than his skill, and he spent 3 years tormenting Maria to protect his image." Rivera played his recordings, 10 minutes of Derek's voice dripping with malice. Planning to break Maria, mocking her race and gender, laughing about her place. The jury's faces hardened, their sympathy for Derek evaporating. Rivera looked at Maria as he left the stand, his nod a promise kept. Maya, watching from the back, wiped tears from her eyes, her phone buzzing with notifications as her latest TikTok video showing Maria's old boxing trophies hit 2 million views. But Derek wasn't done. As the evidence mounted, his desperation grew. Kellerman filed motions to suppress Rivera's recordings, claiming they were obtained without consent, and pushed a new narrative. Maria had provoked the fight to boost her own reputation, using her superior training to exploit a workplace event. The prosecution leaned hard on Arizona's assault laws, arguing that Maria's combat experience made her legally responsible for restraint, regardless of provocation. "Ms. Johnson is not the victim here," prosecutor Amanda Carter declared. "She's a trained fighter who chose to use lethal force in a situation that didn't require it." Maria's heart sank, but she kept her composure, her years of discipline holding her together. Walsh fought back, presenting security footage from Iron Forge that showed Derek's harassment in vivid detail, spilled water, mocking comments, deliberate obstacles. The footage was grainy, but undeniable, and the jury watched in silence as Derek's true character was laid bare. As the hearing drew to a close, Maria took the stand. Her voice was quiet, but steady, her words carrying the weight of 3 years of silence. "I didn't want to fight," she said, her eyes meeting the jury's. "I cleaned that gym every night to keep a roof over my daughter's head. I took his insults, his messes, his cruelty, because I had no choice. But when he put me in that ring, he didn't just want to beat me, he wanted to break me. I fought to protect myself, nothing more." The courtroom was silent, her dignity a stark contrast to Derek's unraveling facade. Derek, sitting at the prosecution's table, couldn't meet her gaze, his hands clenched into fists. The judge adjourned for deliberation, but the tide was turning. Maya's campaign, Sarah's testimony, Rivera's recordings, they were a chorus of truth that Derek's lies couldn't drown out. Outside the courthouse, the #Justice for Maria movement grew stronger, fueled by Maya's videos and the viral footage of Derek's knockout. Local MMA gyms began sharing Maria's story, praising her restraint and skill, but Maria knew the fight wasn't over. Derek's resources, his connections, his refusal to lose, they were still threats. As she sat in her cell waiting for the verdict, she thought of Maya, of the future they'd fought for, of the strength she'd buried for so long. She'd survived 3 years of Derek's cruelty. She could survive this. But the question lingered: at what cost? The Maricopa County Courthouse buzzed with tension as the jury filed back into the room, their faces unreadable, after just 52 minutes of deliberation. Maria Johnson sat at the defense table, her hands folded, her heart steady, despite the weight of the moment. The past weeks had been a storm. Derek Stone's felony assault charges, his polished media campaign painting her as a dangerous aggressor. The viral #, Justice for Maria movement sparked by her daughter Maya's TikTok videos. The 42-year-old black female janitor, once invisible in the gleaming halls of Ironforge Academy, was now a symbol of resilience. Her knockout punch against the gym's arrogant head trainer replayed millions of times across social media. Derek sat across the courtroom, his jaw brace gone, but his face pale, his once confident swagger replaced by a nervous fidgeting. His lawyer, Richard Kellerman, had fought hard to suppress the damning evidence: Coach Rivera's audio recordings, Sarah Martinez's documented complaints, the security footage showing 3 years of Derek's relentless harassment, but the truth had clawed its way out. The jury foreman stood, her voice clear. On the charge of felony assault, we find the defendant, Maria Johnson, not guilty. The courtroom erupted cheers from the Justice for Maria supporters, drowning out the stunned silence of Derek's dwindling fan base. Maya, sitting in the back, burst into tears, her phone still buzzing with notifications from her latest video, now at 3 million views. Judge Patricia Hawkins raised her gavel, calling for order, then delivered the final blow. Mr. Stone is ordered to pay $80,000 in compensatory damages to Ms. Johnson for legal fees, lost wages, and emotional distress. Derek slumped forward, his world crumbling, while Maria remained still, her dignity a quiet force that filled the room. The fallout was swift and merciless. Within hours, the Arizona Athletic Commission launched an investigation into Derek's training credentials, prompted by Rivera's recordings and public outcry. By the end of the week, his certifications were revoked, barring him from operating any combat sports facility in the state. Ironforge Academy's owners, desperate to save their brand, distanced themselves immediately, issuing a statement condemning Derek's behavior and announcing his termination. His social media empire, once boasting 500,000 followers, collapsed overnight, his accounts flooded with comments calling him a fraud, a bully, a relic of toxic bravado. Sponsorships worth over $120,000 annually vanished, and his GoFundMe for recovery expenses was shut down after being exposed as a sham. Derek's attempts to salvage his reputation, teary interviews on local podcasts, claims of being misunderstood, fell flat, drowned out by the viral footage of his knockout and the undeniable evidence of his cruelty. He was 35, jobless, and facing mounting legal debts, including lawsuits from 2 former staff members who'd come forward with their own stories of harassment, bolstered by Rivera's recordings. Derek Stone, the self-proclaimed alpha of Ironforge, was now a cautionary tale, his name synonymous with the consequences of unchecked ego. Maria, meanwhile, was rebuilding from the ashes of her old life. The $80,000 settlement, combined with a crowdfunding campaign sparked by Maya's videos, gave her a lifeline. She turned down lucrative offers from elite gyms across Phoenix head trainer positions with salaries triple her janitor's wage because she had a bigger vision. With Rivera's help, she leased a 6,000-square-foot space in downtown Phoenix and opened Second Chance Defense Academy, a martial arts school rooted in her philosophy of respect, dignity, and protection. The academy wasn't just about fighting, it was about empowerment. Maria designed a sliding-scale payment system, ensuring anyone could train, from low-income kids to single parents to seniors. Her classes blended practical self-defense with what she called warrior ethics principles of de-escalation, empathy, and using strength to lift others up, not tear them down. The heavy bag from Ironforge, the one that had betrayed her secret, hung in the academy's center, a plaque beside it reading, "Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one everyone overlooks." Students flocked to her, drawn by her story and her skill. Within months, Second Chance had 200 members, from former gang members to suburban moms, all united by Maria's belief that everyone deserved the tools to protect themselves and the wisdom to use them responsibly. Maya became the Academy's social media manager, her TikTok account now a platform for sharing her mother's journey and the Academy's mission. Her videos clips of Maria teaching proper jab technique, explaining how to diffuse a confrontation, or laughing with students during warm-ups went viral regularly, amassing millions of views. One video showing Maria helping a shy 12-year-old girl land her first punch was shared by a UFC champion with the caption, "This is what real coaching looks like." Maya's work didn't stop there. She spoke at local schools, sharing her mother's story as part of anti-bullying programs, her voice steady as she told crowds, "My mom taught me that strength isn't about hurting people, it's about standing up when it's hard." Her sociology project, From Janitor to Hero. The power of viral justice became a sensation, earning her a scholarship to Arizona State University, where she planned to study law and fight workplace discrimination. Maria watched her daughter's transformation with quiet pride, knowing the pain of those 3 years at Iron Forge had forged something unbreakable in both of them. Coach Rivera, now in his early 60s, joined Second Chance as head instructor, his decades of experience complementing Maria's vision. He taught alongside her, his gruff demeanor softening as he worked with kids who reminded him of his younger self. Tyler Harrison. Derek's former prize student was among the first to enroll, his ego humbled by Maria's knockout and Rivera's coaching. Under Maria's guidance, he rebuilt his technique from the ground up, his defense tightening, his combinations sharpening. "I was learning garbage," before he admitted during a class, his voice low but earnest. "You're teaching me how to fight for real." Tyler's Instagram, once filled with flexing selfies, now featured posts crediting Second Chance for his undefeated amateur record, his captions praising Maria's warrior values. Sarah Martinez, fired from Iron Forge for testifying, found a new home at Second Chance as business manager. Her decision to speak out had cost her a job, but gained her something more, a community that valued truth over profit. She ran the Academy's operations with the same quiet efficiency she'd brought to Iron Forge, her guilt over years of silence replaced by purpose. Second Chance Defense Academy became more than a gym. It was a movement. Within a year, over 300 martial arts schools across North America adopted Maria's standards, mandatory anti-harassment policies, character-based instruction, and zero tolerance for discrimination. The International Mixed Martial Arts Federation created the Maria Johnson Award, honoring instructors who embodied her principles of respect and empowerment. Maria's morning routine hadn't changed. She still arrived early, still cleaned the mats herself, still moved with the quiet dignity that had carried her through Derek's abuse. But now she cleaned a space, she owned a business built on values she'd never compromise. The Academy's walls were lined with thank you letters from students whose lives had changed, a teenager who'd escaped bullying, a single mother who'd found confidence, a former addict who'd discovered purpose. Maria's classes were packed, her curriculum adopted by 20 school districts, reducing bullying incidents by 65% in participating schools. Professional fighters visited to train with her, drawn by her technical brilliance and her philosophy. Maria Johnson is the future of martial arts, a former UFC champion said on a podcast with 4 million listeners. She's proof that real strength comes from character, not ego. The Academy's scholarship program, funded by donations from supporters worldwide, provided free training to over 500 low-income students annually. Maria's philosophy was simple but revolutionary. We teach people to fight so they'll never have to. We build strength so our students can protect the weak. We demand respect by showing respect. Her mission statement, written in her own handwriting, adorned the Academy's main wall in elegant script, a daily reminder of what she'd fought for. Every afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the windows, casting shadows across mats, where former strangers trained side by side, Maria watched her students with a quiet smile. She'd lost a job as a janitor, but found her purpose as a teacher, a leader, a warrior, in the truest sense. Derek Stone's fall was complete. At 37, he worked a minimum wage job at a small gym in rural Nevada. His name, a footnote in the MMA world, his story, a case study in business ethics courses. His occasional attempts to rebuild his reputation were met with swift reminders of his documented cruelty, the internet's memory unforgiving. But his downfall served a greater purpose. It showed that bullies could face consequences when their victims found the courage to stand up and communities chose justice over comfort. Maria's story, chronicled in a documentary titled Second Chance: The Maria Johnson Story, premiered at a major film festival, earning critical acclaim and a Netflix deal that brought her journey to 50 million viewers. The film didn't just expose Derek's abuse, it celebrated Maria's resilience, Maya's activism, and the power of collective action. The lessons of Maria's story were clear-etched into every class she taught, every life she touched. True strength isn't about dominating others. It's about enduring, adapting, and rising above. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it, especially when the stakes are high. And justice, though hard-won, is possible when good people refuse to stay silent. Maria's Academy became a beacon for those who'd been underestimated, overlooked, or oppressed, proving that everyone has the potential to change the world when they choose to fight for what's right. As Maria stood in the center of Second Chance, watching a 13-year-old boy practice a defensive stance she'd taught him, she thought of the girl she'd been 20 years ago, gloves raised, ready to take on the world. Some victories, she realized, were worth waiting a lifetime to achieve. And in the faces of her students, she saw the truth. Real warriors don't create victims, they create other warriors.